Evening, residents of Everett, Washington. I would like to call to order the special meeting of the Everett City Council meeting on November 17th, 2021. In accordance with the Governor's Healthy Washington guidelines and an effort to protect city employees and members of the public from transmission of COVID-19, the City Council is conducting our weekly council meeting remotely. We are prepared to reopen the council chambers to public meetings when public health considerations indicate it is safe to do so. There are several ways in which you can engage with the council and participate in our meetings. To watch or participate in a remote meeting, you may watch council meetings live on Comcast Channel 21 or Frontier Channel 29. You may watch live online at www.everettwa.gov/citycouncil, where you may also watch past meetings. You may call in to listen to the live meeting at any point by dialing 425-616-3920, conference ID 724-887-726#. You may find the public comment registration form on the City of Everett website under the City Council Department. Once you go to register here to provide comment via Zoom, you will need to fill the form out completely if you wish to provide public comment at a future meeting. After the form is submitted, you will receive an email confirmation with the Zoom link and the phone number to the meeting. And participants must submit this form 30 minutes prior to the meetings. Forms submitted after that time will not be received in time to get the Zoom link and number, but may still participate the day of the meeting by submitting comments in writing to council@everettwa.gov. For assistance, please contact the council office at 425-257-8703 or email Deb Williams at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. And please note, we do not allow comments on any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office, and we do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. Outside of our meetings, members of the public are always welcome to contact council members or provide comments or concerns on any matter via email at council@everettwa.gov or by calling the City Council office at 425-257-8703. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Excused?
Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Vogely.
Here.
Councilmember Tui.
Here.
Councilmember Bader.
Here.
President Stonecipher.
Here. I'd like to call on Councilmember Vogely to read the land acknowledgement this week.
Thank you, Council President Stonecipher. The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Shtahopsh people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy, would you please lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. Thank you, Council President. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of November 10th, 2021?
Councilmember Bader, so moved.
Roberts, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Tui.
Yeah. Oh, abstain. Excuse me.
Councilmember Bader.
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
I'll abstain. And thank you. Before we go into mayor and council comments and reports, I'd like to follow up on an item that was discussed at last week's meeting. I'm sorry to have missed the meeting. I was out on vacation, but I did have an opportunity to watch the video. And at that meeting, Councilmember Murphy brought up media reports that Snohomish County is planning to use some of their ARPA funds to purchase a motel in Everett, which would be converted to housing for homeless residents. At that time, Councilmember Murphy raised some very legitimate concerns about these plans and requested a briefing on this project as soon as possible so that he and other council members can learn more about the project and how any impacts in our community can be mitigated. I know that he and Councilmember Vogely also worked on a letter requesting that the county halt their plans until the city council can be briefed on them. We will not be taking up that letter for deliberation or action this evening. However, I do believe there are some very important aspects of the county's plan that need to be discussed publicly so that we policymakers and importantly, so our residents can learn more about it. So in response to Councilmember Murphy's request, I've scheduled a briefing for next week. That's Wednesday, November 24th, and that meeting will be held at 12:30 in the afternoon. This briefing will include representatives from Snohomish County who will be briefing us on their plans to purchase a hotel or motel. And we'll also get a briefing from the city's planning director, Yorick Stevens Wadja, to help us understand the land use regulations related to the conversion of a motel or hotel to permanent housing for homeless individuals. As Councilmember Murphy pointed out last week, this was all a surprise to him, and other council members have also agreed that they didn't have a lot of details on that. As I will say, for me, as a senior council member on this body, I've been down this road all too often, and I know it's never fun to find out important matters affecting our community by reading it in the newspaper, and sometimes there are true surprises that no one anticipates. This is something that it sounds like representatives from our city administration have been working on with the county and getting various details throughout the time. I don't know exactly what those conversations were like. But I do think that as part-time council members who are mostly have full-time day jobs, we're not really in the office hanging around the proverbial water cooler to hear things informally. So we have to really rely on the formal means of communication that we have. And as most of us know, and members of our community know, we're currently following the collaborative leadership model with council members that are assigned to specific departments as liaisons. While I think that all council members had a broad sense that the county was going to move forward with a motel purchase or was thinking about that. I think we received, I don't remember the exact date, but in October, Julie Willie gave us a briefing and we did get that. As those things were unfolding, I have talked to the council members who were assigned to departments who under that collaborative leadership model, those departments that would have intersected with this project, and the council members that were assigned to that weren't really being briefed on what was planned. And so this is kind of an example where I think our idea of that collaborative leadership model had to get a little bit of a breakdown because we didn't get the information to the people who needed it. And so I guess I would just say as we move forward, I hope that we can think a little bit more proactively about how we communicate some of these things through our formal methods. And even if we're erring on the side of over communicating information, it could be helpful. And I recognize that some of the information that has probably been discussed was not fit for public consumption, but certainly some of it could have been. As for the actual plan to purchase a motel, I have to say that I think this seems like a really intelligent way to provide inexpensive space for housing in a very quick manner. And as we know, construction costs have really increased in this market. It may very well be true that you can purchase for more, obviously more quickly, but more cheaply also than you can build something. So with the hundreds of unhoused individuals living on our streets, I really think it would be beneficial for everyone in our community for them to get some more permanent housing. So while I don't think the communication process has been flawless, I do look forward to hearing next week about the plans and learning about how we can ensure that there are not negative unintended consequences that would occur in our community and how we can help alleviate the impact we are all experiencing by having this unhoused population living on our streets. And in the end, I believe our goal of expanding housing of this type will be served by this project. We just need to make sure the details are sound and meet the needs of our community. And that's what our goal is for next week's briefing. So I would say to council members, if you have specific questions or information that you would like to request from the county or our planning director or really any other city department for next week's briefing, will you please send those requests in advance so that the people who are doing the briefings can have time to prepare information that they may or may not think to bring with them. So if you know that you have some specific information, I think that would be very helpful. That's for next week. With that, I'll move on to Mayor Franklin. Good evening, Mayor.
Yeah, good evening, President Stonecipher. I really appreciate your comments on that issue. And I think that this was a difficult issue because it's not a city purchase, it's a county purchase. And so trying to navigate the confidentiality with the county, with the information, I think as a city, we tried to put it in our documents that we shared with you, whether it's through Julie Willie's updates or Council Digest, but without being able to share any details because, again, not knowing where the county was. And then I too was surprised that it came up at their council meeting. I wasn't aware how far along they were, but I can share in prep for next week's meeting that, as I've shared with you over the last few months, we've been working on a multi-pronged approach to address homelessness. You've heard updates from Julie, and we've shared some of those and other updates with you. But in addition to any city-led initiatives, local mayors and I have been meeting every couple of weeks, and we've really been focused on what we as a region can do to address homelessness. And one of those was working closely with the county to hopefully have them help tailor solutions in each of our communities. So together, mayors have been advocating to the county to allocate significant financial support toward a coordinated approach that would expand treatment, temporary shelter, services, job training, and everything that those unsheltered residents might need. During the pandemic, I know the county was utilizing a motel as temporary shelter, and now obviously they wish to expand that. As I understand, it's a $6 million investment, and I'm sure the county will share more. So it's a very exciting investment, and certainly one we wouldn't be able to afford on our own. But again, the county is working closely with the other mayors as well, because as we all know, we want solutions in Everett that are going to serve Everett, but every community in our region needs some solutions that are going to meet the needs in their community. Because this is not a challenge the city can do alone. And so those investments from the county are really important. And I'm obviously very grateful that Executive Summers and team are willing to make that investment, and grateful to have them come to council next week at your invitation. Thank you, President Stonecipher, and look forward to hearing whatever they can share publicly. And again, know that the program will probably not be in full detail until the county is actually able to move forward with the project. So some of our questions will probably remain unanswered, but in the meantime, I will continue to advocate strongly with the county for solutions that will fit and meet Everett needs. And as soon as it gets to the point in the process where we can engage with our community, I very much look forward to engaging with the council and the community on any details of impacts. But look forward to seeing these solutions coming into Everett. And then in addition to that, I just wanted to share, I just got back from Vancouver just about an hour ago, British Columbia, and was at the Cascade Innovation Corridor conference. And it was a really great conference put on together with British Columbia and Challenge Seattle and other partners. I was there with Greater Seattle partners, and we were focused on climate change and transportation and how this entire region, not just Snohomish County, but all the way down to Pierce County and up to Vancouver, can address some of these challenges like affordable housing and transportation. So good work happened, and I'll look forward to sharing more with you on that as well. And with that, I have no further comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to council comments and liaison reports, starting with Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, President Stonecipher, and I want to thank you for the recap on the situation with the county hotel. And yes, I did bring that up last week. And as you mentioned, one of the concerns I raised was just the issue of the city council not having had any sort of briefing or heads up and understanding of how this might work. And certainly, I think we all understand and recognize that this issue of homelessness is one of our top priorities and one of our top concerns here in Everett, as well as across other communities in the county. So very, very pleased that you've been able to get an expedited briefing from the county. I very much appreciate you working on getting that scheduled next week. There were two other aspects to my comments though last week, and one of them had to do with just the issue of transparency with our public. I think part of this is, as city council members, us being able to do our fiduciary duty as policymakers for the city, being able to ask the questions that need to be asked, not only from a land use perspective, but also from the standpoint of the impact on other city services. Because of course, the county may purchase the hotel, but it still would sit in the City of Everett. So if there are police calls, if there are fire calls or EMS calls, social service calls, all of those things could and will have an ongoing operating impact to the City of Everett. So part of this is understanding both in the short term and the long term what those impacts might be. So that's sort of the one aspect from the briefing. But importantly, the second aspect of it is just making sure that we're having a transparent process with our community and with our residents, being able to also understand how this might impact the community moving forward and giving them an opportunity to weigh in as this unfolds. And so that was the second part of this. And I'm glad that we'll have the briefing in public and that the community will have an opportunity to learn more about it as the city council does. And then the third concern that I had raised was just from a timing perspective. I had brought up that in early October at a county council meeting, two of the county council members had in fact proposed an amendment to county ordinances that would have required the county to come to any municipality where a county purchased hotel would be located and work in a collaborative and communicative way to ensure support from the community. That amendment was put forward by two council members, Councilmember Lowe and Councilmember Nearing on the county council. And unfortunately, it was defeated on a 3-2 vote with even with Everett's county representative, Megan Dunn, voting against it. So the other point I had made as a result of that was wanting to make sure that this purchase did not occur prior to the city council and the public here in Everett having an opportunity to hear about this project and the impacts. And so at that meeting, as you know, I did suggest and got a second from Councilmember Bogley, which I very much appreciated, to work with the city attorney on the letter. I did want to follow up with all of you, and earlier today, in fact, this morning, I believe I sent a copy of that draft letter, as well as an email that kind of summarized what we were trying to accomplish with that. I do appreciate, Council President, that letter is not up for discussion in terms of action tonight because of the fact that it was not on the agenda, the published agenda. But I would like to request, in addition to the briefing next week, that item would be added to the agenda. In case it was necessary after the briefing, perhaps that can be added after the briefing, in case there's still a need or a feeling on the part of the city council that we need to send some sort of a letter. It may be that after the briefing, we don't believe that's necessary, but I sure would like to have the opportunity to have that on the agenda and follow through if that is possible. So council members, you'll find that email with that proposed letter in your emails earlier today, and we can discuss it certainly further. And I certainly invite comments from not only the public, but also my colleagues. And with that, no further comments from me this evening. Thank you.
Can I just respond real quickly? Thank you. We will definitely have Chief Templeman at next week's meeting to answer any of your questions on the impacts. Those are great questions. Obviously, Brenda mentioned the planning director, of course, as well. But if necessary, I'm happy to invite the fire chief too. I hadn't anticipated him as well, but we'll be sure that they're available to answer any impacts on or any impact questions for you next week, if that works for you.
That sounds great. Thank you, Mayor. We will move on now to, and I will talk with administration and consider how best to address the letter that you have authored, Councilmember Murphy. So I'll take that up with for our agenda consideration for next week's agenda. Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Stonecipher. I have no comments tonight, but I would appreciate the colloquy and will appreciate the information that will be provided next week. Also, to Mayor Franklin's comments, based on certainly the research I'm doing in my other work, the focus on regions as the building blocks for climate change and the focus on them as the building blocks because they are an economic structure as well as a geographic structure is really critical. And I look forward to, Mayor, whatever you feel you can share and would be happy to meet with you to learn more. So I wish I could have been there with you, but I'm looking forward to hearing more about that work. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Thank you, President Stonecipher. First, I will tell you about my meeting today under the collaborative leadership model. I just want to put out two items, and that is that some staff members actually were able to take a walk with the pediatric critical care folks, and they typically go out every day to go to the park, and it was neat that, like, I'm gonna say names because that's easiest for me. Corey Hurt and other staff were able to walk down 18th, or try to anyways, and just get more of a sense of the need that people are facing with sidewalks or not sidewalks or noise, and it was heartwarming and I think very important to be able to bring the ability and disability focus into their work. So thank you for that. And then transit, I think they might have told us this already, but we as Everett Transit are at 90% service for pre-pandemic and 100% staffing, which really helps with overtime and not having to have overtime. So I just wanted to share that because those are two key points I wanted you to know. And then, of course, going back to last week's meeting, I did receive several phone calls asking me to clarify my intentions. And I did reach out to Councilmember Murphy as well as members of Snohomish County, and I was able to get additional information, which is what I had hoped for, and I appreciate the time members of Snohomish County were able to give me. I also wanted to thank Councilmember Murphy for raising the issue, and I'm satisfied with the information that I received, and I'm very glad that we will be able to get that information in public next week. So thank you for being able to move quickly, because that was definitely what I was going for, was just getting the information. So thank you, and that is all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Toohey.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Council President, for setting up this briefing next week. I too think that it's just super important, not only for council, but for the whole community, so that we can have a discussion on it. I think that it's a great use of a hotel that's not functioning as it once was. Hoteliers, especially those that own single hotels or just a couple of them, have really suffered greatly in the pandemic. And it, you know, across this nation, we have many of those that are being reused, which is repurposed, which is a great idea. We don't want them to just sit there and decay. So if we can find a repurpose for this hotel, which would be great. And there's all types of housing needs. And so we just, whether it's supportive or low income or senior housing, I mean, there's all kinds of great ideas that we could work with on the hotels that aren't going to make it. So anyway, thank you very much for that. I also got me thinking about trying to remember what our current supportive housing ordinance looked like so that I could remember all the details as far as management, neighborhood outreach, parking, and all those kinds of things. So Deb did send that to me, and I'm sure the rest of council probably would like a little refresher on that. So I'm sure she'll be glad to send that out to everybody too. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I will see to it that Deb Williams sends out those regulations to the rest of the council members in advance of next week's meeting. We'll move to Council Member Bader.
No liaison report and no comments. Thanks.
Thank you. And I will only comment that in case it seems like the COVID pandemic is drawing to a close, and I know that for many people who are vaccinated and whose lives are returning to a more normal rhythm, it may feel like we're kind of at the end of the road here, but in fact, in our community, we are not. The hospital, again, for the next 2 weeks has had to cancel all elective surgeries and is essentially closing down everything tomorrow, any procedures, anything. There are currently, at least at some point this morning, there were 40 people waiting for beds in our hospital, and many of them are afflicted with COVID-19, and there have been drains on ICU resources and an inability of the hospital to really meet the demand of our community. They are still in crisis. If you have not been vaccinated yet, please get vaccinated. And for the rest of you, please take care so that you don't end up in the hospital because they're really stretched and not really at a great space to be able to deal with any other issues other than what they are dealing with already. So stay safe out there. That's all I have. I did also want to remind the community that the City Council will not be accepting public comments tonight on the council workshop on the American Rescue Plan proposed investments. This is just an opportunity tonight for the council to have a transparent discussion regarding the funds. Anyone, though, who has comments on this after they hear it is more than welcome to send those to us in writing or to come to our next council meeting or a future council meeting and make a comment in our Zoom meeting. That's all I have for now. Do we have an update from administration this evening?
Thank you, Council President Stonecipher. Nick Harper, no update this evening. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move on to City Attorney comments. Mr. Hall, what do you have for us tonight?
I don't have anything to report tonight, and there's no executive session. Thanks.
Thank you. Deb Williams, have we received any comments from the community for public comment?
Good evening, President Stonecipher. I have received written comment from Mary Fossey, Paula Ryan, Nancy Barker, and Michael Malahan on the hotel discussion. I've received a written comment from Sonia Voji on the red light cameras. And I've received a written comment from Dylan Sluter on park impact fees, and he is also waiting to speak on that matter, so I'll call on him when we get to item 12. I have provided all these comments to council, administration, and the clerk as part of the permanent record. I have several community members wishing to speak. When I call your name, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if possible. Please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, I will ask you to begin to wrap up, and I'm going to begin by calling on Angela Castillo. Angela?
Hello. I had comments on the hotel. Is that going to be a discussion? It sounds like it's going to be more of an informational instead of a discussion about we're not necessarily looking for this in our neighborhood. When can we have that discussion?
You can make a comment at any time about your neighborhood. So that could happen. Now, next week is just going to be briefed about sort of what the process is and how it fits into the city's planning process. And of course, the other questions that Councilmember Murphy raised tonight about public safety considerations.
Okay, I prepared something. Can I read it then? Is that okay for now?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I know it'll be less than 3 minutes. So my name is Angela and I live in the Silver Lake area of South Everett. There's a rumor of the hotel on 19th Avenue, and assuming this is the hotel north of the Everett Costco, that it might be the site of this shelter. South of the Costco on 19th Avenue and 112th is a Safeway. And regarding this possibility, I wanted to share the reasoning why I hope it's nowhere near my neighborhood. This is the place where my kids and others frequent their parents for groceries and sometimes walk there with their friends to get snacks. After being fed up with seeing the trash as I frequently jog by and no action being taken to clear it, I started clearing it on my own. Each week I collect 5 to 8 full garbage bags full of trash. And it's not just your bottles and wrappers type of trash. In all transparency, it is an abundance of needles, needle caps, bags of feces, bottles of urine, foil burned from drugs, bags of vomit, several pairs of underwear, and empty aerosol paint cans next to whippets that are obviously used for huffing, and it goes on. So some think of safety in regards to physical harm, but the larger issue for me is a great deal of trash full of biohazardous materials left out for the community to handle, including kids. So I have zero confidence that just because there is a place for these folks to stay, that they will no longer panhandle for food, money, use and or deal drugs, leave trash, and pass out on the sidewalks, buildings of local businesses, and prostitute. I challenge anyone in the community, especially the leaders, after the meeting or your next shopping trip to the Safeway in Silver Lake. Their staff is amazing, by the way. No problems there. But to take a walk around the perimeter and see what you see, knowing kids walk by this all the time. I noted on a Thursday in the north side of the parking lot at 2:30, very specifically, an SUV pulled up and 6 other cars randomly parked ready to buy, obviously drugs with cash in hands. I even saw 2 kids ride up on their bikes to be in line too. So those Safeway carts the homeless are using as their own closet are the same that you put in your family's produce in, and touching the same handles as the homeless person who filled an empty bottle of urine. So then ask yourself, how would you like your child to work here someday? Maybe their job is to pick up the trash with the needle stick gloves, or shepherd the carts full of garbage, or walk to and from their car where drugs and drug deals are going down. I'd look up the data on how many times 911 or the non-emergent line has been called for issues in that area, just at the Safeway and not even at the Key Bank next door that has been robbed several times. I've called the non-emergent line to report much of this as advised by Mayor Cassie Franklin in a previous session.
30
and
seconds.
my ask is that, can you guarantee that we will see less of this in our communities and not more as a result of this hotel project for those of us who want a safer and cleaner community for our families? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And if you have those and are able to provide those in writing, we'd appreciate if you could forward those to us. That would be great.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm calling on Linda Carlson. Linda? Linda Carlson, please go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your camera if possible. There she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Linda Carlson, and I really just found out about this meeting and the issue today. And I did read the article in the Everett Herald. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to make a comment. And I've lived in Everett for over 30 years. And unlike the previous person speaking, I'm at the opposite end of it, that I'm almost 80. I'll be 80 in a little over a year. So as a senior, I worry more and more about my safety and so forth. And yet I am really open to helping the homeless and the refugees as well. I think I got a lot of information from President Stonecipher and Mayor Franklin, as well as Council Member Murphy. Those are some of the reasons why I wanted to comment. One, I was hoping to hear more about the county and the city working together to address this and not sort of have the problem surprise or steamrolling Everett. So I'm glad to hear that next week there is that, what did you call it, the collaborative leadership model of working together to address some of those things. And so I guess next week there'll be more information coming. What I'm worried about, and I recognize that not in my backyard thing, how it's a visceral thing for me, even though intellectually and ethically, I know we should help everyone, but yet I fear for my safety a little bit. I mean, I'm worried about that, and how Council Member Murphy mentioned something about how emergency services could be impacted if ambulances and police are going out on things to do with these new residents of Everett. May or may not be problematic. I don't know. But I do wonder who will ultimately be responsible for the hotel or the residents shelter. Who will it be the city? Will it be the county? Will it be both of them together as a something? And how will it be run? And are the residents screened? And I've heard, I read in the Herald, you know, there's the refugees, and then you have your homeless people, who those are two different groups of people that have different needs. The refugees need different kind of from refugee resources. I don't know that mixing those people together, if that's the intention, is a good thing. Maybe it is. It seems to me it isn't. So
30 seconds.
That's pretty much what it is. I do appreciate the opportunity, and I'll come to the meeting next week to hear what more is said. But again, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate it. And on this topic, Ben Zarlingo, please begin by giving your name and residence. Ben?
All right, needed to get rejoined on the meeting. Thank you, President Sohn-Cipher. Actually, with the comments that others have made, and especially the briefing you began with at the beginning of the session, and also the comments from Councilman Murphy, I think the issues I wanted to raise have been raised, and I'm looking forward to the briefing next week. So that's enough for me. I'll listen to the rest of the comments and certainly be there next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. President Stone-Cipher, those are all that I have signed up on this matter. Again, I have Dylan signed up to speak on the park fees, which is item number 12. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deb. And I just wanted to clarify for those who are here to talk about the motel this evening, that was also true in the newspaper article. The county is not has not settled on a location as far as we know, and if they have, that is not being made public. I think at this point we're still talking about sort of a plan in general about buying a hotel, because they are not at a position where they are able to announce a location. But we'll find out more next week for sure. Okay, let's move on in our agenda. We are ready for the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the 3 consent items?
Councilmember Bader, so moves.
Robert, second.
We have a motion and a second for the 3 consent items. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stone-Cipher.
Yes. We have 5 items on our proposed action. They have all been read into the record at their first reading, so I'm not going to read through them, but I will ask council members if they have any questions on any of the proposed action items. If so, please unmute yourself and make yourself known. Hearing none. Items 10 through 15 are public hearings. I will read each of these items and open the public hearing one by one. Council Bill 2110-38, third and final reading. Ordinance levying regular property for City of Everett for fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2022 on all taxable property, both real and personal, subject to taxation thereon. Do I hear a motion?
Council President, Roberts would move this forward, but I know as a public hearing, I assume that it would be moved and then we would hear anyone who was here. So
Yes.
I would move item number 10, Council Bill 2110-38.
Murphy,
Thank you.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on item 10. Deb Williams, did we have any community members sign up for this one?
President Stonecipher, we do not.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Roberts moves to close public hearing.
Murphy, second.
Thank you. Clerk, will you please take the roll to close the public hearing?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes, and now we'll go down the roll and see if there are any further questions or comments before we take up the action, starting with Councilmember Murphy.
No questions, no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
I have no questions or comments. Thanks.
Councilmember Vogely.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Tui.
No questions or comments.
Councilmember Bader.
No questions or comments either. Thanks.
And I have no questions or comments. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 11, Council Bill 2110-39, third and final reading. Ordinance levying the EMS property taxes for City of Everett for fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2022 on all taxable property, both real and personal, subject to taxation thereon. Do I hear a motion?
Roberts moves item number 11, Council Bill 2110-39.
Bader, second.
We have a motion and a second. Deb, are there any community members signed up to speak on this item?
No, President Stonecipher, there is not.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Roberts moves to close public hearing.
Bader, second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. And now we'll go down the roll, see if there are any further questions or comments before we take action, starting with Councilmember Murphy.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Roberts.
No questions or comments. Thanks.
Councilmember Vogely.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Tui.
No questions or comments.
Councilmember Bader.
No questions or comments. Thanks.
I have no questions or comments. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 12, Council Bill 2110-41, third and final reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance relating to planning for parks, amending ordinances 3543-17 and 3543-17 as part of the 2021 annual docket of comprehensive plan amendments, adding a new chapter 19.53 EMC, establishing a park impact fee, and amending ordinance 3774-20. Do I hear a motion?
I would move Council Bill 2110-41.
Thank you.
Bader, second.
Vogely, seconds.
We have a motion and a second, and I know we have someone signed up to speak on this item. Deb, we're ready for that.
Thank you. Dylan Sluter, please feel free to turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and give your name and city of residence, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Franklin, members of the council. I'm Dylan Sluter. I am the Snohomish County Manager at the Master Builders Association. First off, I want to thank the council and the city staff for all their hard work on this. I know when you're talking about raising fees, it can be somewhat a contentious issue, but I appreciate the work to try to come up with some a reasonable approach. I really want to be grateful for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and to comment previously on this. I'll try to be brief, as I did submit 2 separate letters on this issue, one to Planning Commission and one to council. I think the main issue that our industry looks at is obviously affordability. And so when you're starting from basically no impact fee on parks to quite a substantial one that was originally proposed, there is issues when it comes to pricing people out. And I included some data on that within my letter, and then tried to crunch that a little bit to say, hey, you know, if a 3-bedroom home in Everett increases by the amount that's proposed, you're going to price out over 7,000 households from that market. And so we are in a very cost sensitive market, price sensitive market. So even increasing the fees slightly changes the affordability aspect. So we just wanted to make sure that the council was aware and considering that. Obviously, our industry is very impacted by it, the current supply chain issues and whatnot. So this cost is very significant to us. I think a couple other things I wanted to raise is there's comparison that people often try to make within the region, and it can be difficult with impact fees because cities are very subjective and they have different levels of service. They have different growth allocation. And so it can be kind of difficult when you look at sort of neighboring cities to compare because each city has their own separate needs. As far as Everett goes, though, talking about capacity and projects, it seems that Everett, historically at least, has not grown in the way that it was intended to. And so if you look currently on what the 2044 growth projections are, Everett's going to have to grow up nearly 4 times the rate that it currently is. So trying to sort of incentivize development rather than disincentivize is sort of the route I would encourage the council to take. Also, there's some better sources for funding when you're looking at funding parks that don't have some of the strict limitations that you cannot use it for existing deficiencies or maintenance and operations. So something like a park levy may be a better approach that's more fair, that spreads the cost over all citizens, not just new home buyers. And I think the final thing is if the council does choose to go this direction, we would ask just a more reasonable rate. My members have relayed around $750 seems more reasonable to them. So I just wanted to propose that. But ultimately, I mean, the statement that I typically make is it's difficult to make housing more affordable by making it more expensive to build. And so I just want to make sure that we take a reasonable approach to this and try to get it at a level that works for both people building homes as well as future residents of Everett. So I appreciate your time and look forward to continue to working with you on housing issues in Everett.
Thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate that. President Stonecipher, that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
I would move we close the public hearing.
Vogely seconds.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. And now we'll go down the roll and see if there are any further questions or comments before we take our action, starting with Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. I guess a comment and perhaps a question for staff. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Sluter for coming to represent the master builders and providing that perspective. I think, you know, we're all focused on our housing issues broadly, and obviously making housing more expensive doesn't help with housing affordability, as he points out. I did go back through the packet and I'm looking now at the fees, and I believe the fee that's being proposed at this point is $941 for the parks fee for per bedroom with a cap of 3 bedrooms. So $2,823 would be the cap, and that would be even if it was a 4 or 5 bedroom house, for example. And I thought I recalled, this is I guess where the question comes in, I thought I recalled that we had been provided with a number of comparable cities by staff when this was first briefed a number of weeks ago, and that this $941 initial fee, as I recall, was a fair bit below what we see in most, if not all, of our neighboring communities across the county. And so could I just get a confirmation on that, and maybe just a brief remembrance, I guess, of what it was. I seem to remember that this was like half of what we've seen in other communities. But is there anyone on the call or on the meeting from staff that could just verify and validate that?
Hello, this is Bob Leonard, Parks and Facilities Director. And can I also just mention that we do have Jason Hennessy with Burke Consulting. I believe he's in some other area of this. I see him here. Great, he's here as well. So he can hopefully answer questions as well. I just want to remind council that this fee that you are referring to is actually 50% of the overall fee. So we are only proposing that we institute 50% of the fee necessary to keep up with the growth projections. And that the 50% fee does fall on the lower end of the scale to comparable and local other municipalities. That is
Thanks,
correct.
Bob. And so just for the sake of clarity, is this $941 per bedroom with the 3-bedroom cap at $2,823? Is that the full fee and then it's discounted by 50%, or is this the 50% fee that would actually be implemented at this point?
This is the 50% fee that would be implemented.
Okay. Yeah, that jives with what I remember from the briefing. I appreciate that. Thank you, Bob. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
Well, just a couple of quick comments, and really building on the comments made by Councilmember Murphy. I appreciated the staff bringing this forward earlier, and my recollection is, as Mr. Leonard had described, and to Mr. Murphy, and I also appreciate Mr. Sluter's comments. There's just no free lunch in the world that we operate in, and several years ago, Burke Consulting did a report for us that showed the structural budget challenges that we have and to try to maintain services. So there probably is no perfect world here, but the modifications, as has been recognized, modifications to the original proposal have been made. We do have a structural budget deficit, and this is a way of helping address some of the parks needs in our community. We do have significant growth projections to meet our GMA targets. And parks is a huge piece of a livable community. So I understand that there's a balancing act here, but I do think that what's been proposed is a modest proposal relative to other communities, and it is an appropriate one. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Vogely.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Dylan, I suppose I was just going to call them MBEX, for reminding us that the funds that will happen with the impact fee are essentially just for new parks. And that's really good news, considering Southwest Everett has very few parks, and so being able to work with the Burke study and move forward with the newness, I mean, that will definitely come in handy. And I am curious, I know that it is not part of this piece of legislation, but considering an impact fee makes things more expensive, would lowering the parking minimums or getting, having a parking maximum per house or per bedroom be beneficial in the future in bringing it down to more affordability and less car use, and therefore walkability to the parks that we're going to be building? It really is a question that I'm asking. Can we think of that for later?
If that's a question for staff, then good evening. York Stevens Wajda, Planning Director for the city. What you asked is whether reducing the parking minimums would lead to a reduction in the cost of construction. And To the extent that parking takes up either land or structured parking takes up construction cost, then it would result in a lower construction cost and potentially lower purchase price and rentals. Rental costs, on the other hand, need to make sure that transportation is taken care of as well. But yes, any sort of reduced requirement to incorporate something into a development would have the potential to reduce costs.
Thank you. That is all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
No, thank you to Councilmember Murphy for bringing all that up. I was hurriedly looking through the pile to find that information too. So thank you for bringing that up and asking the question. I have no other questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President Stonecipher. I appreciate the comments about the fees, and I think I've raised this going along here. Sorry about the impact is Everett eats with our neighboring communities, and what are our comparables? I think of Tacoma in the region as our comparable, or Renton, or anyhow, but also within Snohomish County, when builders choose to build Everett, seems like Lake Stevens, Snohomish County, Marysville, little concerned that we're have higher fees than those areas, but I guess I know the Planning Commission worked hard on this, brought the fee down. I'll probably end up supporting this, but just concerned what we look like going forward, just because we have so much density goals to achieve, and population growth, and we're not even a fraction of the way there. And I'm just worried this is going to be another detriment pushing that down. I just don't, even though density is a great idea, I just don't think we're there where the vast majority of people want to choose dense housing at this point. So worried about that. Anyhow, I'll end up supporting it, but I just wanted to voice my concerns about about where we're at with this. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think for my part, I would say that there have been, I don't remember the exact figures, but over the many years that I've been on the city council, we have done several times, we have done a study of all the fees that are that we impose on building projects compared to neighboring cities and cities that we would consider our peer cities. And we have always ended up being very much on the low end of that. I know we have nudged some of our fee structures up, but I would be very surprised if I were to find that we were suddenly a very high fee from a development perspective. And this is really about securing the future of our community as we grow. We absolutely have to have more park space. And as we've seen, other communities are using a parks impact fee, among other things, to help bolster their budget. And so I just view this as something that's just essential for us to maintain a quality of life that people want to live in our communities. So I've been waiting for this park impact fee to come forward for a very long time. I'm very happy to support this at this time. And with that, I'll ask the clerk to please take the roll.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 13 is Council Bill 2110-42. It's a third and final reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance amending the comprehensive planned land use map and zoning map for 7500 Hardison Road and amending ordinance number 2021-94 as amended as part of the 2021 annual docket of comprehensive plan amendments. Do I hear a motion?
Councilmember Vogel moves Council Bill 2110-42.
Murphy second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Deb Williams, are there any community members signed up to speak on this item?
President Stonecipher, there is not.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Councilmember Bader, so moves.
Vogel
Robert.
seconds.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Let's see if council members have any questions or comments before we take our action. Councilmember Murphy.
No further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Vogely.
No questions or comments.
Councilmember Tui.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Bader.
No questions or comments.
And I have no questions or comments. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 14, Council Bill 2110-43, third and final reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance amending the comprehensive plan land use map and building heights map, EMC 19.22.150 for a portion of Smith Island. Do I hear a motion?
Murphy moves approval.
Vogely seconds.
Thank you. Deb Williams, are there any community members signed up to speak on this public hearing?
There is not.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Murphy moves to close the public hearing.
Robert, second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. And now we will go down the roll and see if we have any questions or comments before we act. Councilmember Murphy,
No questions or comments. Thanks.
Councilmember Roberts,
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Vogely,
No questions or comments.
Councilmember Tui,
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Bader,
No questions or comments.
and I have no questions or comments. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Now we get to move on to our action agenda. Item 15, authorize staff to prepare a request for proposals to solicit responses for an automated traffic safety camera system. And before we begin, do we have Ryan Sass or someone here? I think I see Corey with his camera on. Do we have a presentation?
Yeah, good evening, council members. Ryan Sass with Public Works. Thank you for the opportunity to present this. I'd like to start just by apologizing for not meeting our target to bring this to you on September 22nd. I will say that we'll be sure to provide all the available resources to advance this in a timely fashion should council decide to authorize us to proceed. And with that, I have Corey Hurt, City Traffic Engineer, ready to provide an update.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, Corey Hurt, City Traffic Engineer. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on a prospective photo enforcement program here in Everett. Earlier this year, I presented the latest safety analysis and preferred location should council choose to move forward with a red light and school zones speed photo enforcement program. Photo enforcement is allowed by state statute, which authorizes cities in Washington state to use automated traffic safety cameras at intersections of two arterials, school speed zones, and railroad crossings. In 2008, City Council adopted an ordinance that authorizes the City of Everett to use automated traffic safety cameras. In late 2019, Public Works presented information to the City Council Public Safety Committee, who requested it to be brought forth to full City Council. The citizen-led Transportation Advisory Committee passed a recommendation to pursue photo enforcement at 6 intersections and 1 school zone in September of 2020. Some facts about photo enforcement programs. Under the ordinance and statute, the cameras may only take pictures of the vehicle's license plate, and only while the infraction is occurring. The photos must not reveal the face of the driver or passengers. Automated traffic safety infractions are processed in the same manner as parking infractions. Our code sets a base monetary penalty of $124. This is very much in line with other cities. Seattle's $139, Kent's $136, Renton and Spokane are $124, for example. A police officer reviews the footage before notice of infraction is mailed to the vehicle owner within 14 days. Like a parking ticket, the violations are not reported to insurance companies. All camera locations must be clearly signed at least 30 days before the camera is activated. Photographs, electronic images, or any other personally identifying data from automated traffic safety cameras are the exclusive use of law enforcement and are prohibited under the statute from release to the public. When it comes to crash reductions, the improvements are immediate at intersections where with photo enforcement for the most severe types of crashes. Major cities that have removed their systems saw the crashes return to the previous norm. Photo enforcement at traffic signals consists of a single pole with a radar unit, a camera, a strobe, and a controller. The system takes 2 photos and a 12-second video of the alleged violation. The license plate close-up is captured from one of the high-resolution images. The images are stamped with time, date, duration of the yellow and the red. School speed zone enforcement cameras work very much the same way. 2 images are captured. The first image is captured of the alleged speed violation showing with the school flashers activated. The second image is captured that shows the distance and time for the vehicle traveled. Data and image is stamped showing time, date, posted speed, vehicle speed, location, even lane number, and direction. We've updated the crash data through the end of 2019 and excluded 2020 data due to pandemic impacts. The likely locations for consideration remain unchanged. To develop this list, we started with the signalized intersections that were top 20 in overall crashes in the city of Everett. We looked at the intersections by direction with the highest crash rate, the highest injury rate, and the highest number of crashes that were cited for failure to regard a stop-go signal. Based on the analysis, the best locations remain Evergreen Way at Casino Road, Evergreen Way at 4th Avenue, Broadway and 16th Street, Evergreen Way and 112th Street Southwest, Rucker Avenue and 41st Street, and 7th Avenue Southeast and Everett Mall Way. The school speed zone proposed is Horizon Elementary along Casino Road. Here's the 6 intersections and 1 school zone shown on a map. All red light photo enforcement locations are at the intersection of 2 arterials as required by statute. We evaluated smaller programs as small as 4 intersections and 1 school zone, which was just revenue neutral. But to ensure the program is financially sustainable over the course of 5 years and provide a substantive safety benefit citywide, staff recommends a program of this size. Any compensation paid to the camera vendor or manufacturer must be based on the value of the equipment and services rendered in support of the system and may not be based on fines, penalties, or revenues generated by the equipment. The camera vendor pays all costs to design, operate, and maintain these systems. We reviewed the vendors that have programs here in Washington. Recently, Vera Mobility acquired Australian company Redflex and now operates the photo enforcement systems in 19 Washington cities. One other vendor, Novoa Global, provides services for 2 other cities, Tacoma and Fife. After reviewing contracts from other agencies, the typical contract is a 5-year agreement with a 5-year extension. They typically allow for cancellation at completion of the term. The normal contract includes camera safety, camera system equipment, system installation and maintenance, event processing services, city staff and police training, and public relations support. We've updated the enforcement lease and support cost estimates for a program of this size. For 6 intersections and 1 school zone, the estimated cost is $1.167 million. Between photo enforcement and school zones, there'll be approximately 1,300 violations to review each month. When reductions are made for failure to pay and for violations that are not issued following an officer review, the projected net revenue is $1.375 million. When all costs of the program of this size remain financially sustainable and revenue neutral with $208,000 in excess. Under the ordinance, excess revenues must be used for traffic safety purposes. Safety improvements can include time of day school speed beacons at elementary schools that don't have them, enhanced crosswalks with pedestrian activated beacons, traffic safety enforcement programs, and other safety improvements. Should council like to proceed with a photo enforcement program, the path forward would include authorization for staff to prepare a request for proposals. Staff recommendation is red light camera systems at 6 intersections and 1 school zone to ensure the program is financially sustainable. If authorized to prepare a request for proposal, the timeline would be as follows. Staff would return to council for authorization to issue a request for proposal in January of 2022. Vendor proposals would be due in February 2022. Staff would then request council award of contract and authorization to sign in April or May of 2022. Typical construction time and program rollout is 6 to 8 months. During that time, the system is constructed, tested, and certified. Judicial information systems are integrated and electronic payment systems would be implemented. Training of police and court staff would take place. A public information campaign would begin and signs would be installed. Only then would the system be commissioned and made active. Thank you. This concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. We will go down the roll and see if there are any questions or comments. We'll start with Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President, and Corey, thank you for the briefing. I know we've been through this before several times, and this has been a long time coming. And I am supportive of this from the standpoint of public safety. I know that all of us care about school safety zones and speeding through our school areas, as well as people running red lights and all the accidents. The one question I did have, Corey, and you may have covered this in a previous briefing, but it's been some months, and that is the financial projections. It sounds like you've done a nice job of laying out the estimate for this on the cost side, and on the revenue side, I know that's sort of hypothetical. And I can kind of envision that when this program is first launched, it might there might be a real spike in terms of people learning, okay, there's a school zone here and I need to slow down, and now we've got red light cameras at this intersection, and after people get their first few tickets, they might start to learn, and the revenue would drop. So the revenue projections that you've put forward, are those kind of an average that you're projecting for over that 5-year period, or are those based on a sort of an initial spike, or does it typically ramp up or ramp down over the initial 12 to 24 months, for example?
Yes, actually, that's exactly what happens. When the system is first initiated, there is a higher level of violations that quickly drop off, and the projections that are here are based upon a fully mature system where drivers have gotten used to the school speed zone or the red light enforcement, and so that's where the projections come from.
Okay, that's good. And again, I think these programs are very effective. I look forward to seeing the information come back, and I'll definitely be supporting this, moving forward with this RFP. So thanks again, Corey.
Thank you, Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Stone Cipher. Thanks, Corey and Ryan, for bringing this forward. I too support this approach. I want to confirm my understanding from the materials you've provided that if I get caught in the red light camera and I'm fined, my understanding is that that would not go on my record from a moving violation, but obviously I would be obligated to pay the fine. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. The citation would not go against your insurance. There'd be no points assessed, and it would be just like a parking violation.
Okay. I just would say that I really appreciate the focus on safety, the focus on fewer accidents, as well as the focus on revenue that is derived from this program going to traffic safety. So I think there's an elegance to that relationship. I also think that there is an indirect impact in that we're able to provide these kinds of services without adding additional staff time or police time or whatever enforcement time, that this really does provide a bit of a indirect benefit in that regard as well. So I just appreciate you bringing that forward and look forward to supporting it. And again, for the record, what we have before us is an RFP to go get the details, and this would come back to council before final action would be taken. Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you, Councilmember Roberts.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
So I have gone back and forth in my support for red light cameras. When I first started, not too long ago, we were in person and having these discussions. And I remember very clearly making certain that it was about the safety aspect and not getting money for it. And there's very good safety reasons to implement the cameras. However, the safety that the cameras provide, that safety leaves as soon as the cameras go away. And I tend to believe that if we can change our structured environment and support ideas that move our infrastructure to towards pedestrian safety rather than ease of vehicle pass through, the benefits of changing our physical environment, it will last a lot longer than expensive cameras. And so I know this is just asking for an RFP, but if we eventually said, no, we don't want the cameras, why put the work towards getting an RFP? So I'm actually not going to vote to get the RFP. And I would strongly urge creating a better and more pedestrian and accessible city so that more people want to move here, so that MBAX can make all of their housing money and we can have affordable housing and people want to be here and go to all the parks. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vogely.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
Yes, I want to thank Corey and Ryan for all the staff work on this. I know it's been a lot, so I really appreciate everything coming back. And as I recall, our conversations were that this is like a 5-year pilot program, so it's not something that we're endeared to for many, many years if we decide it's not worth it. And then also, I recall that there was going to be a period of time as we do the outreach, if this does go through, where we're notifying folks, obviously the people that are pass-through drivers, which I think a lot of this is the pass-through drivers, we won't be able to alert them other than the fact, I think we talked about giving them warning letters the first couple months when it's the initial when it's all set up and running. Do you remember that, Corey? We had that conversation?
Yes, certainly. There are several agencies that have given a 30-day grace period where they sent warnings out. If that is the direction council would like to go, we would absolutely embrace that. I do think that the signs that have the red, yellow, green stoplight with photo enforced garner a lot of attention and do a good job of informing the public that the intersections are photo enforced.
That's great. Yeah, and I do know that whenever the freeway gets busy during rush hour, they certainly are rushing down Rucker and Broadway like crazy and piling up. So I do think this will hopefully help those that are just not living in Everett, but just passing through on their way to and from work. So I will support this, Corey and Ryan. I appreciate all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Toohey.
Thank you. And Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President Stonecipher. Great presentation as always. Learn something every time I hear this presentation. Obviously, running red lights is a problem. Any of us that were out campaigning or helping campaign and waving yard signs probably saw numerous instances of red light violations as we were standing there doing that. I think I saw one every cycle of light every time when I was out doing that. So certainly a problem, and clearly we don't have enough police officers to do enforcement of effective enforcement of this in the broad way it needs to be done. I think you've answered a lot of the other questions. Obviously, funds go only to traffic safety. It doesn't go to the general revenue for the city. An objection we often hear. Obviously, data shows that it does enhance safety. Another objection I've occasionally heard. Privacy concerns are addressed. I do like the idea that Councilmember Toohey raised about that 1 month grace period for people to get used to it and learn it. So if other jurisdictions have done that successfully, I think that'd be great to consider that after we get this RFP. And I certainly hope that it changes behavior. I'd like a situation where Everett really didn't end up getting any revenue because everybody was obeying the red lights. Frankly, if I had all the power, instead of a fine, I would instead send people back to driver's ed if they racked up a number of violations, because I think that would be a more appropriate penalty. Actually, for a lot of violations, but anyhow. So given that you've answered all my concerns, and I will support the RFP as well. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader.
Thank you. And I will just say that I find it interesting that the locations of the cameras haven't even changed over this time. But these are all areas of the city that I frequent on an occasional basis, some of them more than others. And I've seen the unsafe way that people are running through, particularly the protected left turn lights, just trying to get one more car, or two more cars, sometimes more cars through. And the crash data certainly supports the need to do something about it. On the Evergreen Way intersections, the three of them together combined over a 5-year period had over 500 crashes. So I think that we definitely want to think about the safety of our visitors and residents going through our community. I know that there will be some of our neighborhood residents who will be caught up in this. But hopefully they will get smart fast. As I look at these intersections, a lot of these have to be spillover effects from people from the Seaway Boulevard, the aeroplane manufacturing corridor, and other commercial corridors who are really trying to get around the backups that we are seeing on our freeways. So I will support this. I think this is a great move. And as we look forward to the post RFP process, as we look forward to looking at how those funds are going to be used for public safety, I would really be interested in having the council be able to have an understanding, weigh in, and be briefed on how those funds will be deployed if we have at least an initial amount that would be deployable for public safety projects. I think our community would be interested in knowing how we're planning on spending those. That's all we have. Let's see, I can't remember. Do I have a motion on the table on this, or do I need to get a motion?
We have a motion.
We do have a motion. Great. With no further questions or comments, clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
No.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. We are now going to move into the second, excuse me, the second public hearing for the 2022 proposed budget. And at this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Councilmember Murphy, who is the chair of our budget committee.
Thank you, Council President. As we know from our last briefing and the public hearing, we continued the public hearing. What I am wondering is whether or not there is any additional staff presentation tonight before we check to see if there are any public signed into the meeting to speak. Not sure if Susie is on, but Susie, do we have a staff update?
Yes, I am on. Thank you very much. And I did provide council with a revised slide for the street and alley vacation projects per your request earlier this week on email. And I have not had any further requests from council this week, so I don't have further presentation material present for tonight. However, I'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Susie. And yes, we did receive that updated slide, and I really appreciated that. I had, just for the benefit of those not in attendance, I had asked whether or not we could get a recap on the street and alley vacation projects broken down by the 5 council districts, because I know moving forward with districts, there will start to be a greater and greater focus on how the dollars are spread throughout the city by district. And it was very interesting that of the $2.68 million, 1.25 million was spent in District 1, 540,000 was in District 2, 670,000 in District 3, and only $45,000 in District 4, and then finally 175,000 in District 5. So I think this is a lens that as we move forward with actually approving these projects, that certainly the council moving forward would want to take a look at. So Susie, I do appreciate the recap. And as part of the budget process, I do want to just validate for not only my own self, but my colleagues in the community that by approving this budget, we're not actually approving these recommended projects. There are at least 7 recommended projects that total the $2.68 million. Those have come forward, but not been approved, and nor are we approving them as part of this budget. Is that correct, Susie?
That's correct.
Okay.
They'll come back next year as individual plans and systems ordinances.
Okay, so future city council will have the opportunity to take a look at this and how these projects are spread around the community, and by district is certainly one lens. So again, thank you for that. With that said, Deb, do we have any community members signed up to speak on our 2022 budget?
Thank you, Councilmember Murphy. We do not.
Okay, good. Well, we are going to, thank you. We will go ahead, and I would like to ask my colleagues at this time if they have any additional questions or comments. I guess we can go down the line. Council Member Roberts, did you have any further questions or comments on the budget at this time?
Thank you. I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council Member Vogely, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. It's a general question, not necessarily for this particular budget, but I was curious why the full-time equivalent demarcations switched from a lump sum, I guess, of FTEs to seasonal staff and regular staff in the past few years. I'm just wondering why? I think I might know, but
So we budget for seasonal staff differently than we do for our regular full-time or part-time staff. Seasonal staff are budgeted as a lump sum provided to departments. And what you see now in the budget is an estimate of how much that lump sum equates to an FTE. And we began showing the seasonal staff in terms of FTE just as a means to be a little more transparent, to try to provide a better, clearer picture of the labor that goes into each department.
as a follow-up, let's see, so seasonal workers are not offered benefits, correct? So I'm imagining that that's part of the reasoning for lump summing them and having regulars in a separate division.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why we budget for them that way. I would say most seasonals do not have health benefits provided to them, but not all. Some of them do. And, you know, there's such a variety of seasonal labor that's provided, and Parks is a very large user of our seasonal staff, and you know, the conditions change from year to year. So providing a lump sum and then having them use that to hire staff in a way that's appropriate for that year makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. That's what I have today.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Vogely. Moving on to Councilmember Tui. Any questions or comments at this time on the budget?
I don't have any questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Bader.
No questions or comments either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Council President Stonecipher, any questions or comments?
I just had one question about, I lost my paper here. Susie, I noticed that there's almost a $1.5 million cost increase on the self-insurance fund because of a large renewal on the anticipated property insurance premiums. Can you explain to me, since we're self-insured, how the insurance premium overlaps with that? Is it kind of like a high deductible kind of plan that we have?
We have a high deductible plan, but we also do have insurance coverage for property. And we're self-insured in some areas and we have insurance in others. And it's just an extraordinarily hard market right now. We've met with legal and our risk insurance manager there, and they've been in close contact with our broker who brings us our renewals each year, and the outlook is not good. All renewals are coming in extraordinarily high. We typically look to see how Bellingham does because they're, you know, pretty much our peer in some respects. And their renewals came in even higher than what we were anticipating last summer when we were putting the budget together. So we won't get our renewals until late in December, unfortunately. After we get those, we may need to come back for a budget amendment after the first of the year. That just remains to be seen, but it's good to be prepared for that.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just comment, I think for our public in general, just looking at some of the budgetary changes that we've had to make, a lot of them are really having to do with homelessness and public safety issues. So when we look at what we are increasing our investment in, it is mostly related to public safety and some of the quality of life issues that come from having such a large unhoused population. I guess this reference back to our earlier conversation tonight about the motel purchase. So other than that comment, I have no other questions at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. And my only comment at this point is that, you know, we've been saying over the last number of weeks and months through the budget process that we did want to look forward to receiving a outline from the city administration on the ARPA federal funds. And I know we're going to get into that here next. And I think it will be very interesting to see how those funds might dovetail with our operating budget. And so I look forward to that discussion. This budget hearing will be left open. The public hearing is going to be left open until the next budget discussion. And so for the public who might wish to weigh in, certainly open to feedback and input as we move forward. And with that, thank you all, and I'll hand the meeting back over to Council President Stonecipher.
Thank you. So we will now move into the council workshop. As I stated at the beginning of the meeting, we're not going to be taking community comments on this matter. This workshop is an opportunity for council to have a transparent discussion about the American Rescue Plan proposed investments. I believe all of my colleagues received the email from Deputy Harper on this matter. And so I think, Nick, do you have a briefing for us this evening?
Yeah, I'll kick things off. And yeah, people, don't start this slide quite yet, but thank you for bringing it up. Good evening, council members. And bear with me, I'm going to just recap what I shared in a more succinct fashion 3 weeks ago for our listening public. As I know you all are aware, in March of this year, U.S. Congress passed the American Rescue Plan Act, which has been familiarly referred to as ARPA, delivering $350 billion in emergency funding to eligible state, local, and tribal governments. The City of Everett's allocation is going to be $20.7 million. We received $10 million, approximately $400,000 of our total allocation in May of this year, and we'll receive the second half, or expect to, in May of next year. These ARPA funds represent a one-time opportunity to invest federal dollars towards our most pressing community challenges and recovery efforts that we otherwise wouldn't have the funds to support. These funds must be spent within the guidelines established by the U.S. Department of Treasury and are separate from the city's annual budget process. To be eligible for ARPA funding, projects must align with one of the following categories, and there are 5. Support the public health response to COVID-19, address the negative economic impacts caused by the pandemic, premium pay for essential workers, replace lost public sector revenues, and finally, invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Yeah, so 3 weeks ago, I gave you a high-level overview of the types of projects that city staff have been exploring for council consideration. And I think I followed up on Monday with 3 documents. The first was a spreadsheet of discussion for discussion purposes of draft proposals that staff has explored for council consideration. Those categories included shelter and homeless support facilities, behavioral health services and staff, early learning, childcare, K through 12, science, technology, education, math, business education, business expansion and job creation, wealth creation through ownership, placemaking, and small business industries. You know, as you're aware, we have already invested certain federal dollars in 2020 through the Everett Cares program that amounted to approximately $1 million. I also shared with you a 2-page document that the county prepared at a high level overview how they anticipate allocating their dollars across Snohomish County. And then finally, a community survey that our communications team implemented, which Pipa, if you would pull up that PowerPoint now. Thanks. You can go to the next slide. Our communications team put together a survey that went out several weeks ago. As you can see here, we got 714 responses, predominantly, obviously, the majority in English, 2 Spanish responses. Next slide, Pipa. They were broken down by council district in terms of the areas of response within the community. And finally, next slide, Pipa. This was the prioritization based on the responses, those 714 responses we received from the community in terms of where they saw the most need. To date, and again, in recap, to date, council supported staff moving forward with approximately $1 million in Everett Forward grants. This was a follow-up from our Everett Cares program. Council also approved the acquisition of 40 additional pallet shelters, I think back in early October, for approximately $450,000. And so, the purpose of tonight's conversation and workshop, which we're very happy to participate in, is really to hear from you, council members, based on the information you've been provided, the projects that staff has presented, which I think the spreadsheet you received showed a range of spending from approximately $17 million up to north of $30 million, to really understand from each of you, based on community feedback, your own priorities, what you know of our community and the need, how you would recommend staff move forward in thinking about doing additional due diligence and exploration of utilizing these funds for Everett's best interests. We have, and Susie can correct me, we're all on the line, about 4 years to spend these dollars. So there isn't an immediacy of need to get these dollars out to the community. However, as the Everett Cares program in 2020 demonstrated, and certainly why we expedited the Everett Forward grants, we know there is an immediate need, in particular amongst our small business community, to put these dollars to work as quickly as possible when possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Council President Stonecipher, to facilitate the conversation. But we have Dan Ernestey, Julie Willie, Bob Leonard, Kimberly Klein, certainly Susie Haugen, and several other team members all on the line to answer questions as council has them, to hopefully help facilitate your conversation, to give us as much guidance as can be given this evening and over the next 6 weeks, to determine how we should be prioritizing spending going forward. With that, I have no further comments.
Very good. Thank you. I think what we will do as we go through this, I think let's go down the roll and we can have a discussion, and then there will be another opportunity to go down the roll so everyone will get to hear what others have to say and react to that one more time. So we do that, and we will start with Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Nick. Appreciate the materials you've put together, and I have started to go through this, but candidly, I have not gotten through all of your materials that we got earlier this week. But I think just in general, I guess the comment I'd like to make is that, of the 5 categories that have been outlined by the ARPA program as the categories that we can spend the money. The one that I think is the most emergent or the most urgent, and I think we'd all agree, would just be, the 2 really are the first, which is the public health response to COVID, as well as the second one being the negative economic impacts that have been caused. And I know we've done some work, and I think you referred to both the CARES funding that we did last year, as well as some additional Everett Forward grants that were done earlier this year. I think one of the things that we need to decide from just kind of a philosophy or policy standpoint is how much of this $20 million do we want to put into each of these 5 buckets? And at least, from my standpoint, I can see some opportunities in every single one of the categories, but I know from just an urgency point of view, it seems that we would prioritize those first 2 categories, the public health response, which we're still in the midst of it. And we heard from, of course, Council President Stonecipher earlier, a report from our local hospital that doesn't sound very encouraging in terms of momentum right now, but also just the impact on our local businesses. I also think that as part of this, we need to be looking at our nonprofit sector. And one of the things I'm not familiar with is whether or not our nonprofits have been able to access and participate in either these CARES Act or Everett Forward programs. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that at some point. And then I guess the last comment I would make is that, we clearly have in this community, and we've heard about it over the last couple of years, we have, as a result of a lot of things, including the structural deficit and budget pressures over many years, there are a lot of city infrastructure type deficits, I would say, where some of our city buildings have, a lot of deferred maintenance. We've been investing a lot in our sewer programs throughout the city. So I really would like to, I guess, hear a little bit more about whether we might be able to utilize at least some portion of this longer term. And again, that's not necessarily the highest priority right now in the next 6 months, but because I think we have more emergent needs. But for me, I'd like to hear a little bit more about whether we might be able to utilize some of these funds to help make up some of the deferred maintenance and building deficits that we have as a city. So there's a lot there, I know, but those are just some of the topics I think we should go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Roberts.
Well, thank you, President Stonecipher, and thank you, Nick and staff, for bringing this forward. I know we have asked for the information, and I really appreciate you bringing it forward. I have been trying to get through it and think through it, and I wish I could tell you, well, here's a thoughtful set of comments. But I think I would offer several thoughts here for us to consider. First is, and you pointed out, that this really does need to relate to COVID, and that's in the Act. I mean, it's required in the Act, but it's also a recognition that COVID is not done with us. And so looking at the time frame that we have here and how we look at appropriating these dollars, I think is an important issue. So timing is an important issue. Secondly, I would say to be mindful that this is not a bow wave. In other words, where we spend these dollars, we need to be careful not to be creating expectations and expenditures going out that might impact the city's budget in a longer term sense. Thirdly, and I concur with Councilmember Murphy's comments. The public health issue and the economic impacts issue are critical. I also think workforce issues are important, and so the things that jump out to me are the housing piece, and there's a number of options there, and we've already made some commitments with regard to pallet shelters. Perhaps finding some land where we can build some additional areas additional pallet shelter projects would make sense. Another is the business assistance and worker assistance piece. And one that continually tugs at my sleeve is childcare. The workforce has really been, in a sense, impaired because childcare has been difficult to find. And even if you can find it, it's expensive. And it makes it very difficult for people, particularly women, but people who have childcare needs to participate fully in the workforce and therefore in the recovery. So those are issues that jump out to me, the housing, the business assistance, worker assistance, and childcare that really, I think, do address the impacts of COVID. And so then thinking about this going out in time, as we look at not only the FY22 budget, but the FY23 and 24 budgets as well. So those are my thoughts at the moment, and I look forward to going over in more detail the update that you provided and the projects that or project options that you provided. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to Councilmember Vogely.
Thanks. And yes, what they said. Let's see. I also think of childcare. I know that in the news, like federally, nationwide, our legislators are trying to get childcare paid for, at least a lot of it. So I'm curious if it would be all that beneficial for the city to provide that when those monies might be coming separately, but I don't know, maybe I just don't understand how that works. Or maybe I'm just plain wrong, but I have been hearing a lot about childcare in our country, and small businesses. A lot of it goes back to infrastructure, and everything goes back to it's all integrated together. And yes, how do we decide how much money goes into each particular pot? I think it's interesting. The top two are near and dear to my heart, shelter and homelessness and behavior health services and staff. We can't get any, we will continue to be suffering all of the folks out on the street, if we don't have the services available when our co-ed team goes to talk with them. We will continue to have the excrement and needles and just garbage on the street if there aren't public toilets available. COVID definitely taught us about that. Definitely taught us about congregate and non-congregate shelter and the benefits and woes of each. And so, yeah, these are a lot of really great ideas. And how do we decipher that? Well, I guess that's part of the discussion that we're having. And it's a good one. And let's see. So we've got, this is a question now. We get a total of 20 million, but we've already spent how much? And then
we have spent, well, we haven't spent it all, but we have allocated 1.5-ish of that. So we have about 19 million left. This is Mayor Franklin, sorry.
Okay. Thank you for that. And we have, if I remember Deputy Mayor Nick Harper saying that we've got about 4 years, but then he, of course, went to ask Susie the same question. So that is a question. Yeah, about 4 years-ish.
It's not full 4 years. I believe they have to be spent till 2024. Is that right, Susie?
It has to be spent or obligated by 2024. And for those funds that are obligated by the end of 2024, it has to be totally spent by the end of 2026.
Thank you. And then I think my final question for this round is, considering that we have all of this wonderful information, when do we get to, actually, how do we get to finalize the expenditure? because I know that administration has many wonderful ideas, but being the budget okayers that the city council is, how does that work?
That's a good question. I'm assuming some of these will come back because they'll require ordinances or resolutions that the council will have to weigh in on, and some may not. Some may actually be administratively, available to the administration to act on.
Excuse me, if I may, council will need to approve the budget going forward to appropriate these funds.
Will it kind of look like the annual budget in a sense, in that it will be quite big and lengthy, or will it be piecemeal?
I would refer to administration for that.
Yeah, I would say, Councilmember Vogely, that this could be a combination. I mean, as you look at the list of possible projects to explore, they range in huge dollar amounts, and also each project could be complex in terms of one vendor or a myriad of vendors executing a particular program. So I think they will all come. I mean, yeah, this is all new ground to tread to the sense that I don't think the city of Everett has ever received a direct federal allocation of $20.5 million, and Snohomish County certainly has never received a direct allocation of $160 million. So I think the answer is necessarily muddled in that what we're looking for again tonight is a general direction, and in the coming weeks. I mean, this is something that we anticipate everyone needs to process, but in the coming weeks, we hope what we get back as staff is some general direction of a project list that could equal over $30 million. Where would council like staff to expend most of its time and energy in terms of coming back to you with more refined recommendations on executable projects?
So it almost sounds, thank you very much. It almost sounds as if maybe a workshop, with council speaking to each other about, and, really just arguing it out without arguing, being civil and all of that. But because this is significant, and this will be my last question for this one, I swear. What is the cutoff point for a project where the city council must approve it, or administration can just go forward? I know there's a cutoff limit, but I cannot remember what it is.
It's 50,000. So, but it has to be for something that, like the Everett Forward grants, if it's Everett Forward is under 50,000, then we can execute on that without it coming back. If it's over 50,000, we cannot execute it. But since all of this is new, all of this is going to come back in some way first, aside from what you pre-approved, because what we're really trying to do is, we made recommendations in addressing homelessness and mental health, which go to the, what Councilmember Murphy, kind of the public health and safety side of things. We made recommendations in economic development. And so we're kind of looking for some general direction of the areas that you as a council would prioritize, so that as we're further developing these, we're focusing on the ones that are most interesting for you, and knowing that we won't be able to complete them all at the same time. We're going to be bringing them back over the course of many, many weeks and months. So just some general guidance from you of where to start will help us get some of these dollars into our community.
Okay, thank you very much. Small business, housing, mental health. That is me.
Thank you. Councilmember Toohey.
Yeah, thank you. This is really great, Nick. I really appreciate how you put this together, and it's a lot to take in. I really appreciate the survey, because I think for me that will help me a lot. And knowing that, my priorities are pretty lined up with the community is great. I prefer projects that don't give us long-term impacts on our budget, so that, we are working with partners, helping businesses, we're helping daycare centers or whatever it is, but we're not carrying that burden into the future by adding either programming or facilities costs onto the city that we don't have already. So I would prefer to look at things like that if it's possible. And which would mean we'd use it, and then somebody would take over from that and hopefully expand on that. But I just need a little more time here. I do believe that the homeless and the behavioral health services are huge, and obviously the economic impact to the businesses has been also very big. And so for me, those pop out first, but I certainly like a lot of the other projects that are in here. So hopefully we can address a little bit of all of those. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President Stonecipher. There's really not a lot not to like in this list, but as with my colleagues too, concerned about that bow wave that Councilmember Roberts mentioned. A good example of that, I think, I really like the idea that childcare in Everett Station, I think it's an elegant solution for occupying space. On the other hand, I'm really afraid that if we fund that, once we get to the end, all of a sudden there's the political pressure to fund that. And even if we solve our structural deficit problems, I don't think that gets us more revenue or I don't think it gives us more options to spend. It just avoids us having to make other cuts. So I'm a little leery about those kind of things. So I'm wondering if, I don't know if administration has better crystal balls than we do or not, but is there a way that administration could go through and kind of highlight those that think they have the longest, or wouldn't be most likely to create that bow wave versus those that won't? On the other hand, or if there's a way to taper it. So for instance, with childcare, as the employment rate grows, hopefully as we come out of the pandemic, is there a way to begin to taper that, for instance, so that we are not creating the expectation that we're going to fund a permanent childcare program? Second, then there are other things that, are like one-time things, but I'm not sure they're connected to the pandemic. I think the urban forest one, cool thing to do. On the other hand, is that really pandemic connected? And so would ask about that. I think as I look through the Snohomish County document, it seemed to me that they did a really good job of doing both those things, connecting it to coming out of the pandemic, as well as not doing something that was going to impose a long-term cost. So to the extent, that we follow their, obviously we wouldn't do exactly the same thing they're doing, but, kind of follow that lead. Anyhow, again, I don't know if administration could help us with that, or, what is most pandemic related, or is most likely to create a bow wave. But if you could, that'd be great. If not, then go through and do it. To me, the one thing that is so clearly obvious is the Everett Forward grants. We did those during the pandemic because they were so clearly pandemic related. So anyhow, just that would probably be an obvious one for me. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Great
Thank
feedback.
you.
And we can definitely try to put something like that together, Councilmember Bader. I think that the goal would certainly be for any of these to not create that bow wave, but there is a risk in some of them. So we'll work with the team and try to use our crystal ball to the best of our ability as to where there's higher risk of that and lower risk. So we'll be sure to follow up.
Thank you. For my part, I just have a few kind of overarching questions. So I appreciate looking at the community input survey, but sometimes communities' impressions of need are different from actual areas of need. And I'm just wondering, was there another metric that you looked at in terms of looking at what the highest need are. Obviously, the housing and health and mental health services, those pieces I think are pretty well known. I'm just curious about some of the other areas of investment and what we are using as our barometer for thinking about what the needs are and how to get those into the mix in terms of a priority.
I'll speak first, and then Nick, you can elaborate. I was a part of the county's, I'm going to forget what it was called now, but it was their economic recovery task force, chaired by former Mayor Stephenson and Amy Drool, and led by the county economic recovery team. And over the course of a few weeks, months, a number of areas were discussed. And that's where issues like childcare and other things came up as needs that didn't necessarily, I mean, they occurred to me as a mom, but we weren't getting, a ton of feedback on that. But some of those areas, small business support, and kind of workforce re-engagement, those were areas that came up in that. And so as we were working with our teams, those are some of the things that were shared, as well as the work that we're doing in partnership with the Greater Seattle Partners and their economic recovery initiative. So trying to pull any of their thoughts on this into what we might have asked our residents. But that's just kind of work that various city staff did. We didn't do any other extra analysis or survey. So it's more just trying to incorporate all of these partners that we have and what they're hearing and exploring and saying, okay, maybe those are things that we would add into questions. And then of course we had the what have we missed, that, that general one line question from the survey, but we got, wildly different responses from all our residents on that one question. And Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, not specifically. Yeah, I mean, I think we did the best to tailor the survey in coordination with our communications team. Specific to issues that we think we've learned are the biggest barriers to re-entry of the workforce, in particular for people who are, kind of the backbone of our economy, service industry workers. A lot of them are, single parents or just single adults. And those barriers have been real and significant for the last 19 months. But certainly, I think there's probably no reason why we couldn't contemplate additional outreach work to the community if there are other issue areas that we ought to explore. I think, anyway.
Yeah. I'm curious because on childcare, for example, I mean, do we have any data that help us understand how many people are not able to re-enter the workforce or haven't re-entered the workforce because of lack of childcare, within our community? I know that's nationally an issue that has been raised. I'm just curious how we would think about the need within our city limits. And a little bit of related to that, I'm also curious about how we might measure how many people would be impacted by our investment, and just kind of trying to figure out how can we get the most bang for our buck in terms of the number of people within our community that could be helped or impacted by various things that we're looking at. And it won't surprise you, related to that also, I'm wondering if we have some thoughts about the metrics that we might use for thinking about and measuring the effectiveness of some of these investments that we might make, and what that would mean in our community. So but you ask the numbers person what they think, and this is what you get. So in more specifically, some of these issues under the project description, I don't know what those necessarily mean. I don't really understand the project description for some of them. And I don't know exactly how to get more specificity on some of that. Should we be sending you a note? Should I ask my questions and think about what would happen? I'm looking at, for example, increased access to public restrooms in needed areas, with the high range of the investment being $500,000, and knowing that we just approved a contract to do a restroom in conjunction with the port down at the boat launch that was, I think, $750,000 or more, maybe, and that might have just been our portion of it. I'm just wondering what is this? Are these porta potties? Are we thinking about permanent restrooms?
We have Julie Woolley on the line. She can, I honestly would suggest you ask specific questions tonight. We do have the staff on the line. So Julie Woolley would be the best person to answer that question. I believe she's on.
Hi, Julie, I see you.
Good evening. In regards to public restrooms, certainly the shutdown of COVID did provide really a clearer understanding for our community, in particular the downtown area, where people didn't have a place to go to the bathroom, and public restrooms became a big topic. And so we wanted to include it on our list to see if this is a opportunity for us to enhance public restroom access in our community. And it will not only address those maybe that are living unsheltered, but also those that are coming for tourism and coming back to the city for entertainment. And we have been working with our church partners about this topic. We've been talking to the county about the impacts of public restrooms. And so we just wanted to have this on a list so we could dive into it a little more. We have talked with our Downtown Business Association, and they have relationships with other communities that have put things like the Portland Loo in a community, which is a permanent structure that has kind of amenities that keep it able to be clean and safe. And that is about $100,000 investment with about a $1,200 a month ongoing maintenance, so it's not an unforeseeable cost for us to absorb. And so that's kind of where it's a lower amount based on kind of that model. So that's where we're at today.
Okay. So then I'll just ask the rest of my questions. The hotel room vouchers piece on there, is that just because we think the funding, it's between $150,000 and $500,000? Is that because the funding that we've been using, because it sounds like you want to maintain that as a resource, are we losing the funding source that we've been getting for that?
Well, that's, again, it's on the list because we just don't know if the county will continue to allocate voucher money for that. But we know that it is a resource for those that are ready for maybe next steps to treatment or next steps to some kind of pathway to stability. And so that hotel voucher money is a really viable tool that our COET team has been able to use. And so we wanted to leave that on the list to make sure, again, because COVID, we've had this increase of people living unsheltered on our streets. We wanted to be able to address that by having multiple tools to do that. And the hotel vouchers is certainly one of them.
Okay. Number S6, the county partnership for a shelter. So county partnership on strategies to increase shelter capacity between $500,000 and $1 million. What specifically is considered in this item?
Well, this item is really, Mayor Franklin referenced that she has been in communication with the county and with other municipalities about how do we work together as a regional effort. And we wanted to make sure that we put forth some kind of monetary amount to ensure that our community, our county, or our other partners know that we are invested in that plan of working together. So it could be a collaboration with other communities to build a program, a regional program together. But it's a placeholder for us to say we are in trying to build regional strategies that address shelter. And you'll also see it down below in the mental health, behavioral health portion. We just kind of segmented it out, both shelter and then addressing the behavioral needs. But it's up to about a $2 million investment to show our desired partnership to
to create countywide solutions.
Okay. I kind of understand all the early learning, childcare, and that section. I'm just curious as to how we might come to some understanding of the actual need in our community for that. As I mentioned before, I'm interested in the home ownership ideas. The homeowners fund a sustainable home ownership strategy. I noticed a few of these items say the program is pending legal decision for the ARPA compliance. Is that because we're not sure if this fits in the strict guidelines?
Yeah, and that home ownership is like that one in particular. I think that's there because it was something that you, President Stonecipher, I know were very interested in, and I think Councilmember Murphy was really interested in that as well when it came to our housing action plan. And so we wanted to earmark a portion, but working with Susie and the legal department, everything that we do has to be tied to some loss or change due to COVID. And so there's, none of these programs have been developed. These are just ideas. Some of them have been further thought through than others. This one hasn't, really been fully fleshed out. But before we even go down that path, having the legal team review and say, will this be something, if we go down this route, will it be eligible? And so it's still kind of in that question mark area.
Because one of the things that we accountants know how to do is to say, perhaps this couldn't be funded outright from those funds, but we could fund some of our city services. As I remember, the ARPA funds can be used to do just regular city operations. So if there were, $500,000 to $2 million worth of operating expenses that we could fund with this, that would free up part of our operating budget to seed the home ownership program, that would be something that would be interesting to think about, not just for this one, but any of the other areas that we would like to invest in that don't maybe they're kind of in the gray area or something and we're not sure.
Yes, Susie can speak to that. I think that's something that she's been trying to help us with too. So Susie.
Yes, we are certainly trying to follow down all paths towards funding these priorities. And just as you said, we're looking at what kinds of projects and programs can we only fund through the ARPA funds, because they would not otherwise be authorized expenditure of the city. But what can we fund as a city, as a primary function of government, and fund through our revenue loss path that might not be specifically related to the COVID issues. So we're really trying to follow all paths.
Great. And then tell me a little bit about the Wealth Building Foundation. I'm not familiar with this EDI, the Portland Community Investment Trust, Mercy Corps.
I think that's Dan Ernest.
It is, yeah. Thank you for the question, President Stonecipher. Yeah, it's a fairly innovative process and program, and there are similar ones throughout the nation that are trying to get at how do we build wealth and equity in real estate in communities that have been historically limited access to that because of capital, because of investment types. And so basically it's what they did in Portland was buy a strip mall in the area that they wanted to help and sell it in shares to community members from that community who either were just investors in it or actually were actual tenants and participated in it as well. But the fact that it went into a foundation that could then have the ownership in relatively small installment plans, sometimes $100 a month type thing, allowed people from that community to invest in the asset,
build equity over time, have something as renters that is oftentimes very difficult to do without home ownership or something like that. So that's the basic gist of it. And obviously there are some pretty complicated needles to thread along the way.
Okay. I get the small business. I'm glad to see the city permitting project, and I noticed that there was some staffing in the planning department to help expedite the permit process. So I think that's great. One of the things that I don't see, I mean, other than the urban forest, I noticed that fairly high on the list, maybe in the middle of the list of the the survey priorities that were identified by our community members who completed the survey, had to do with open space and I can't remember, park space. One of the, I think, glaring omissions of our parks inventory at this point is that we have one neighborhood association in our city that does not have a park within that neighborhood footprint, and that is the Holly neighborhood. And so one of the things that I had in my mind was to think that perhaps it would be, this does create an impact on the city's budget, albeit probably not terribly significant on an ongoing basis. But if we could look at possibly including some funding identified to purchase some park space in the Holly neighborhood, it would be something for that community, which has definitely wanted to get a park in there within their footprint for a long time and have been really advocating for that for many years. It would be nice for us to think about how we might be able to make that happen with some of these funds. I don't know what's available out down there, but I would ask the Parks Department to take a look and see, is there anything that we would be looking at that would be affordable?
President Stonecipher, can I make a comment to that?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw your attention to, I think, the last item on the list, the stormwater. I think it's called stormwater infrastructure.
Yeah.
But
that's my last question.
Yeah, what that was really referring to is that, and it's going to come out in the pros plan, which the council will be able to look at the beginning of 2022. But we're looking at doing some partnership with the City of Everett Surface Water Group to create some stormwater parks, which basically take land which we could acquire new in deficit areas, which would be our plan, similar to that area, and basically create park amenities and infrastructure, stormwater infrastructure on the same site. And hopefully they could connect together and be symbiotic in their relationship, hopefully even have some passive and active recreation with interpretive work that really, so that residents could interact with the stormwater features potentially as well. We've already met with the Surface Water Group and started to identify some potential properties that would fit their needs for new regional stormwater facilities and that would meet our needs for deficit areas like the Holly neighborhood. So the good thing about that is that it also might be funds that would enable us to leverage the dollars as well, where we could potentially use it for matching for like conservation futures to try to acquire properties as well. I think it would be a good synergy there to really make those dollars go a little bit further. So that is part of the plan about, as you were referring to, trying to get some of those parks, those deficit areas. That would be one way where we could take a look at doing that.
Oh, that would be great. I'm glad to hear that. Would the utility then be partnering with finances? Would they be matching for their portion of the stormwater piece?
This is, if the council wants us to still move in this direction, we'd have to really vet this out a little bit further, exactly all of the details. But yeah, it would be a partnership. The utility would definitely be responsible for their portions of it. And then the park would be responsible for the park amenity type portions. Not to belabor the point, but we could even expand this concept to existing stormwater features and to also adding some stormwater features to some potential park sites that are already existing as well.
Great. Oh, good. I'm glad because I wasn't sure what that was. That was one of my last questions. So thank you. That's very helpful for me. I did promise that we would go back through the roll again in case any of the discussion jogged anyone else's thinking. So we will return now back to Councilmember Murphy for another round.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that and appreciate you going through some of those questions, Councilmember Stone-Cipher. Some of those were things I was going to ask about too, so that was helpful. I want to circle back a little bit on my earlier comment though on the city-owned infrastructure and deferred maintenance deficits and so forth. I didn't really see a lot other than the stormwater infrastructure project, that anything that maybe would fall into that category. And is that something that staff would be open to looking at? You know, we've had these reports done a year or so ago that talked about so many of our buildings that are really in dire straits. And you know, obviously with the revenue hit we took last year, that severely hampered our ability to even think about doing any of those projects. So it seems like that might fall within one of these categories. You know, maybe it's the second category or the fourth about replacing lost revenue and how that would be used. But is there something that we could look at to take at least a portion of these funds to try to help us get some momentum going on our city-owned infrastructure that's in dire straits?
Yeah, oh, sorry, Dick.
Oh, no, please, yeah.
We definitely have the need, as you guys are all painfully aware, so I appreciate you bringing it up. We didn't put those recommendations in this first round just because most of those recommendations are so expensive that it would have taken just the bulk of the money. We do have some you know, thoughts in here about renovating city properties, you know, investing in those properties, especially ones that we might be able to then lease out and get some revenue coming in, which would then in turn help us probably maintain some of our facilities. So that's one aspect that we're looking at, but I can work with staff, or Nick can work with staff to try to put together that list for you. But I think why you didn't see it in this first round was just, and it's the same with other really big infrastructure projects that the city has to undertake, that 20 million would be gone pretty fast. And so we were trying to find a way, how can we put some recommendations that we believe our community will really feel the impact of these investments, with only a small amount going to maintaining infrastructure. But we can share the other possibilities with you, and certainly look forward to you weighing in.
Yeah, that'd be great. And, you know, and I get it that, you know, I certainly wouldn't advocate for putting a huge portion of these funds to that category. But, you know, if there were one or two projects that would really help the city, that might be worth looking at. The other thing I wanted to follow up on is just a little bit more on the whole nonprofit arena. You know, the forward grants were great, and, you know, I hope that maybe some of our nonprofits were able to participate in that. But it occurs to me that, you know, for many years, our local nonprofits have been working to solve a lot of these issues, and those nonprofits have been severely harmed by the pandemic, just as a lot of businesses have. And so there's sort of two parts to the whole nonprofit question for me. One is, you know, getting some of those forward grant type dollars in the hands of the nonprofits to help with their revenue shortfalls and just to bridge the gap. But then the second part of it is that it seems to me that there might be some nonprofits that we could partner with to actually help us make quicker progress to positively impact some of these areas that we're talking about. So rather than the city, you know, trying to administer some of these, maybe there are some nonprofits out there that we could look to partner with, you know, obviously in the shelter and homelessness category, that's an obvious one, as well as behavioral health and services like that. So I just think that we should be maybe thinking about whether or not we would partner with some of those local nonprofits to try to help really get this kick-started in some of these areas, because these people have been doing this type of work for, in some cases, many years or decades. And for the city, it might be sort of a new activity for us, and so we might not be able to get accelerated as quickly. So that's just I guess that's just a question or a philosophical thought that I would put out for both the, Nick, the staff, mayor, colleagues, just to maybe think about or weigh in on.
Councilmember Murphy, may I just respond to that?
Sure.
Julie Willie, Community Development Director. Our nonprofit partners have just been incredibly amazing and resilient over the last 2 years, and we have had a ton of money, both state funds, federal funds, county funds, even our city cares funds, right? And they've just been stepping up and doing such a tremendous job. They have a limited capacity, right? Because of the increased workload that they've been given. And we also know that they've had hiring challenges, right? Because of whether it's childcare issues or just COVID related or, whatever. So we have a lot of challenges ahead with our nonprofits, but I continue to see them stepping up and so ready to partner with the City of Everett. We actually, as a community development division, have initiated a meeting with our nonprofit partners to bring them all back to the table to say, how can we work together? How can we address these issues? How can we meet the needs of our most vulnerable residents, including those that are living unsheltered and including those that are living chronically unsheltered, right? Those that are causing us kind of some of our biggest challenges. And so I feel like rest assured that we do have community partners that will step up and that we absolutely want and need them moving forward. So I appreciate you looking out for them, and I look forward to sharing more and bringing those success stories to you.
Well, that's fantastic news, Julie. I'm glad to hear those dialogues and conversations are happening. So certainly look forward to hearing more about that. So that's really all I have at this point, Council President.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to Councilmember Roberts.
Thank you. Great discussion. Appreciate this. I'm sort of combing over the material. The one question that jumped out at me, though, is there a link or is there a relationship between the federal act that just passed with infrastructure and how we might leverage dollars in both ARPA and infrastructure? And it may be that there's not a great fit, but at least a couple of the projects that are on the list are direct infrastructure, or at least potentially funded with the one or the other. So I just put that out there, recognizing that you haven't had a chance to look at that, but I would hope that we would at least take a look at that as we go forward.
I can just respond briefly in that. Yes, we're working very closely with our federal lobbying team. We have meetings scheduled with our federal delegation over the coming weeks. And yeah, with the federal infrastructure package, as large as it is, there's still a tremendous number of kind of unanswered questions in terms of how to access those dollars and, kind of what the mechanisms are to compete for them. So, but certainly to the extent we can leverage those resources to hopefully supplement what has already been allocated will be a top priority.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I know as I ask that question, the chances of you really being able to answer it in this moment is probably not great, but at least it's something you're looking at. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Awesome. Thank you. So many things. I'm really excited to hear about the stormwater park scenario, knowing that we don't need to go into that tonight. We did talk about it at the Westmont Holly Neighborhood Association meeting, and it's a big deal. And so I can't wait to hear more about that. Workforce re-engagement. And I think the elephant in the room is that a big reason that people aren't going back to work not only is because there's no childcare, but there's just this country does not pay our workers enough, and our corporations do not pay their workers enough typically. And we need to definitely continue as a city and as an organization that hires people and puts them to work, that we continue to have the benefits and pay the wages that for the most part are pretty livable. I mean, except for city council, but we won't go into that. And grants. So the nonprofits, yes. Knowing that a lot of the nonprofits have the capability and the possibility of like having the restrooms. Sometimes it's the only place that you can go to use the restroom. So working on grants for like, we probably already do some of it with not the chips, but the CDBGs. And so maybe more of that. And then also one of those community groups is thinking about doing a bunch of small films. And I mean like snippets, like longer than TikTok, but shorter than a movie, for really getting out the information about the folks living on the streets and the folks possibly being evicted, and the ways that community can be engaged and informed and compassionate. So I don't know, I don't get to write, what the grants are that you can apply for. I wouldn't want to, but I imagine that that might be a possibility in the ARPA funds, is we don't have to have our own city brand help the people. We can let the people brand it to help the people. Yep, that's all.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Tui had to leave the meeting, so we'll go to Councilmember Bader.
Looks like he may have had to leave the meeting too, or
Uh-oh, his microphone is out.
oh,
Yes.
Huh.
Well, do you have anything to say, Bader? I might be able to lip read because if you want to try. No?
Okay.
Okay.
And I have nothing more to say. I've said my piece and some. So I guess I'll ask Deputy Harper, what's the next move on this item? I know we have some council members who would like to spend a little more time digging into the details. When are we thinking that this would be approved from a budgetary standpoint for spending, or how is this going to come forward to us? What's our next move?
I mean, that's a great question, Council President. As I indicated earlier, we're not going to use an expression because this is the first time the city's received this significant of an allocation. And as Susie pointed out, it sounds like we have until the end of 2024 to allocate the funds and to be expended by 2026. So, I mean, it's really a back and forth discussion. I think I personally, and I think the team on the line, all appreciate the feedback we received. I've been taking notes, and so we will process what we've heard in terms of priorities for each of the council members that have spoken tonight, and we can distill that into some type of a memo to put back to you all. Whether there are discussions that occur as part of this budget process or into next year and beyond. I mean, it really is, I think, an iterative process.
Mm-hmm.
Every item I think that our team has come up with, in particular on the list that we were discussing today, are very large items that will require a significant amount of staff work to refine and bring back for, actual consideration and action. So I think, what would be most helpful for us as we provide you additional information and report back what we feel like we've heard this evening is to continue to refine where it is that the council wants staff to be spending the bulk of its time in prioritizing how to identify spending opportunities that are going to provide the greatest benefit for our residents on, those 2, 3, or 4 priority items that are categorically defined by the Department of Treasury for eligible expenditures. So I'm not trying to talk in circles, but
right. And
I don't know that we have a clear set of next steps other than what I think are, I think all 7 of you or all 6 of you that were on the line tonight for the discussion this evening, we will report back based on what we think we have heard, where it seems council wants staff to be spending its time to prioritize how to allocate these resources. But again, I think the allocation is still, several steps away in terms of making a clear determination of how we could utilize these funds. But yes, Mayor, please.
Yeah, and then I think, President Stonecipher, if this works too, perhaps at one of our next meetings, the two of us, I'll kind of walk through one at a time with you again, because some of those may be further along or easier to bring back and present as an option for council's consideration, whereas others need to be fully fleshed out. But what we wanted to do with this was, initially we brought the pallet shelters to you because there was kind of an urgent need. We were feeling like we should buy more of these now, so that we knew there was going to be a backlog, and that was a program we'd likely want to expand. We also knew that the Everett Forward grants, but we didn't want to bring each one of these piecemeal. We wanted to show you kind of an overarching plan or areas that we thought would be worthy of investment. And so getting this information from all of you tonight, getting the additional questions in the coming weeks, and having us try to get more information. But also, we don't want to wait until 2024 to make all these investments either. So some of them are going to be easier to implement, and some of them are going to take a lot of time. And so maybe I can work with you as the council president and kind of dig into that. And then you can share that information with the full council, and we can kind of gradually move through the coming weeks, and maybe some of them we can authorize earlier while we're still debating some of the other ones in the future.
Yeah, and I think along with, my question of how we're measuring the need, I think there's also, in my mind, a question of like timing on some of these things. Some, when you're trying to sort of reboost our economy, maybe some of those things are more immediately needed as well as being easier, but also being a more immediate need, if that makes sense. So we can talk about which of those things really need to go first, but we certainly don't want to give up any of this funding. So if it's going to take a lot of staff time, I think there's an assessment of, what do we need to get those things to happen, and do we need to hire, a consultant or something to help us, work on some of them that might have some more technical expertise.
The only other thing I was going to add, Council President, is, and it might not be necessary for Dan to chime in this evening. We could certainly talk about it next Wednesday or December 1st, but there will be a number of Everett Forward grant contracts that will come back to council for approval in December. So there will be action on a significant amount of community investment that will occur between now and the end of December. And the timing of that is kind of subject to just getting the contracts, drafted, signed by the vendors, and then brought back to us for your consideration and approval. And those were all Everett Forward grants, but a number of them, it's a combination of private sector, both for-profit and nonprofit organizations in Everett that have been, recipients of those dollars.
Great. Good. And the ones that are coming back to us are only the ones that are in excess of $50,000.
For formal approval, although you'll
We'll see all of them.
About a few weeks ago, you'll receive obviously a briefing on all the allocations, but the ones that you will formally approve are those grants that are $50,000 or in excess thereof.
Okay, great. And the other thing that we had already approved had to do with the pallet shelters. And are those on track to be delivered, or have they been delivered, or where are we at on that part of the?
If Julie's still available, I would ask her to respond because I don't know the specific.
Yes, they are en route. They are being manufactured right now, and we are working with them to determine if they will be storing them or we will be storing them. And we are working with the Gospel Mission to add pallets on their property and trying to do that just as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, I think that is helpful. That brings us, I believe, to the end of our agenda here. So we'll wrap up for tonight. As noted at the start of the meeting and provided on the screen, you may contact Deb Williams in the council office for instructions on watching, listening to, or participating in our weekly meeting. She can be reached by phone at 425-257-8703 at the council office, or by email at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. And with no further business, we are now adjourned.